Let's talk about AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It was incorporated in 1963. For 10 years prior to that, it was known as the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. AIPAC calls itself America's pro-Israel lobby.
It's all based upon this demand that we indulge what everybody knows is an utter and complete fiction, which is that we're allowed to talk about the power of the NRA in Washington, we're allowed to talk about the power of the Saudis in Washington, but we're not allowed to talk about an equally potent, well-organized, and well-financed lobby that ensures a bipartisan consensus in support of U.S. defense of Israel. That the minute that you mention that lobby, you get attacked as being anti-Semitic.
Ryan Grimm is the Washington, D.C. bureau chief of The Intercept. He's worked with the Young Turks as well. He is a great investigative journalist, author, reporter. Once actually duked it out with the big man. What's his face?
Mr. Waters.
Jesse Waters. That's what we talked about extensively last time you were here.
That was fun.
Yeah. Here's the Ryan versus Jesse interaction. We're not going to do this every time he's here, man. That's crazy. But yeah, at White House Correspondents' dinner at a party, Jesse Waters and Ryan Grimm had a little bit of a scuffle, and Jesse Waters tried to steal your phone, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, he wanted my phone because I was filming. I was ambushed. Did the reverse ambush on the ambush guy.
Yeah, he did not like that. Is he a big guy? I think
he
I asked
actually
you this
is.
before.
He's like 6'3", maybe 6'4".
I could beat his ass.
Yeah, you could take him.
I could take him.
Yeah.
He's so bad. He's like, he can't do the Tucker Carlson thing at all. He wants to, but he can't do it.
He's got that frat boy shtick, and you can't take it beyond.
Yeah, but you already have Hannity for that.
Right. Now
Hannity is like the aged out frat boy who is like a more likable figure overall.
Yeah.
Like Hannity still has that vibe of like you can have a beer with him going for him as like an older frat boy. Whereas Jesse Waters is like the type of person who you don't want to have a beer with because you got to cover your fucking drink.
Yes, he still has all the frat energy.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jesse is the one who popped his wife's tires. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. While he was, yes, exactly. It was his, like, the woman worked for him. He was like one of his producers, and he took the air out of her tires so that he'd have to drive her home. Very romantic.
Yeah, it's really, really romantic stuff.
How have things been out here?
I've been holding it down, man. I've been holding it down pretty hard, doing my very best. Things have been great in Los Angeles. Crime is free. Crime is legal, as you might have heard.
I have heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
so there's no crime then?
Technically,
it's not a crime.
If it's all legal, it's no crime.
Yeah.
Wow, we're beginning to sound like Cenk, Cenk 2024, who I'm voting for, of course.
Do you see they knocked him off the ballot in Arkansas?
Yeah, racism.
It is.
Yeah, it's fine
if
it's fine if George Romney gets on the ballot or Ted Cruz gets on the ballot.
Or John McCain. Panamanian American John McCain.
Yeah, John McCain gets on the ballot, or Barry Goldwater.
There you go.
Yeah, which is surprising. You wouldn't think that.
He was born in like Mexico, right?
No, he was born in a reservation before the state even existed. But then they grandfathered him in.
Nice,
as far as I understand it. So. Yeah, it was Arizona territory, and then they grandfathered him in because they were like, "Oh, this guy's racist. Like, of course he's American.
He's fine." Yes.
Yeah. So all of these people. Wait, what? Hamas asked American liberals to vote for Trump in 2024. What do we do? Yeah, that's what Abu Obaida came out. I heard today and said, "I'm being sarcastic."
He's
endorsing Donald Trump. Who is very famously super pro Hamas and pro Palestine in general.
He did call Hezbollah like super smart.
Well, I mean, he does that all the time. He said that about Xi.
Yeah.
He'd be like, Xi.
Putin? He said that about Putin?
He says about Putin. Yeah. It doesn't mean that his like policies deviate from the American foreign policy blob. As a matter of fact, it's just like more unhinged and off its rails usually. Yeah. But yeah, you're here. You have a book. Let's talk about the book. You have also a request as well. We're going to knock out Ted Cruz today.
Knock Ted Cruz out. That's right. Yeah, the book it officially came out today. And so it's called The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution. The cover's like a mock-off of that like Obama Hope poster. And yeah, currently Ted Cruz is sitting at, I think, number 13 on the bestseller list, which he gets to by like using his campaign to buy a whole bunch of books. So they put a little cross next to those books.
Oh yeah, they that's like the classic. That's every Republican does that. That's how Donald Trump Jr.'s book got.
They just put them in warehouses and just let them take up space. And Cruz even sued the FEC, and it went to the Supreme Court, where he was also allowed to like lend his campaign money and then pay himself interest, like a decent amount of interest, and then use the money that he lent the campaign to like buy his books.
That's insane.
And then get paid back with that, and then raise money from small donors on email and from big donors around Texas and around the country to then pay back his own loan. It's a wild grift. So I think he's the most vulnerable to getting knocked off the list.
Yeah, I think it's really funny when Ted Cruz does that. We say, oh, like, I guess that's kind of allowed. But when George Santos does other stuff.
Oh, yeah, come on. Yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah.
I mean, I have joked about this already, but like the major problem with George Santos is that he just didn't do the crime by the books. Like, I've talked about this quite a bit with like Dinesh D'Souza, for example. It is virtually impossible in the United States of America to like actually do campaign contribution.
Yes, it's almost impossible.
Fraud. It's like you have to be really bad.
Yes.
Like you have to be deliberately going out of your way to do like straw donations
from like 13-year-old Chinese natives.
Yeah. It's just
maxing out.
It's like very odd, and George Santos did kind of do that, where he actually went above the campaign contribution limit, which is like, again, how do you fuck that up?
He even stole. Did you see this? He stole from some Republican member. Like they gave him his credit card.
Max Miller.
Yeah, he takes
his
the
mother's credit card.
Just
he
kept
stole,
swipe.
He maxed out with a Republican representative, Max Miller's card, and his mother's card as well. And the problem is, he went above the $2,700, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like the max campaign contribution
way
limit.
above it. Yeah.
He went 5,000 and multiple times.
Yes.
He fucking hit that multiple times, and now they're in trouble with the FEC because like it looks like they maxed out to a Republican, and that's also not legal.
And then there was this big question about where did his $700,000 come from, and the Democrats are all like, they found some Russian that was close to him, and they're like, oh, Russia like got a plant here in Congress, and it turned out that there was no $700,000. Like everybody just assumed that his paperwork was correct, that if he said he got a $700,000 loan, he did get a $700,000 loan. Turns out he just wrote that down so that the RNC would be like, oh, he's got money. Because they only support rich people. Like if you're a regular person running for Congress, they're like, no, thank you. That's not how we do this. So he's like, no, somebody lent me $700,000. And then the Republicans are like, okay, cool. That's your ante. We'll match. Go get them.
Speaking of,
made it up. Yeah.
Speaking of Republican donors, an article came out today about an excerpt from your book.
Yes, this is a fun one.
Yeah, and well, I guess we could just go to your article on the Intercept.
Yeah.
Oh God, I gotta skip that paywall.
Oh my God, how'd you get around it?
It's
brutal.
I'm a hacker.
Oh, good man.
No, I have an ad block.
It's awful.
Yeah.
Like it keeps asking for my email. I'm like, you guys have my email.
AOC was offered $100,000 by AIPAC to start the conversation, and she turned them down. So this is from your book, right?
Yeah. Yes. So if you remember, she wins in June 2018. She beats Joe Crowley. Everybody thinks that she's going to be kind of like a trivia question, like who's the obscure candidate that knocked off the next Speaker of the House. But then she starts doing television interviews, and she's just like crushing every single one of them. And people are like, oh, no, it's like Joe Crowley. He's going to be the trivia question. Like, who was the dude who lost to AOC?
Yeah.
And most people probably don't even remember his name by now. He's a lobbyist in Washington at this point. So for the next like 3 weeks, her star is just like,
there's people in my chat asking who's Crowley.
Exactly. Yes. This is Speaker Joe Crowley would be if like AOC had not beat him, he would have been the Speaker.
You know what's really interesting about that? This is something I think about quite a bit. I feel like if there's one guy who should be the most thankful to AOC, it's motherfucking. It's like everyone in the New York Democratic Party orbit, but it's what's Nancy Pelosi's up and coming replacement for Joe Crowley, who's now Hakeem Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah,
she made him.
Yeah,
she was the blocking back that like cleared this his just like empty 80-yard run.
Yeah,
to
literally.
the
Hakeem
end
Jeffries.
zone.
Hakeem Jeffries had another like 10 years of percolating before he got to this position.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for AOC knocking Joe Crowley off.
Yeah.
And yet he is so disrespectful to her.
Yeah, and you know, as she says in the book, like he's been like pretty cool with her this year, and maybe he's like, you know what, thank you, appreciate that. But also, they have nothing to fight about because they're in the minority.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, they have Israel to fight about.
I do. Yeah, of course. Hakeem Jeffries, Richie Torres, like all the New York congresspersons in general are, of course, notable for being the most pro-Israel, with the exception of obviously like the New York congresspersons and like New York politics at the state level, at the local level, is like either you're pro-Palestine in a way that is like unheard of historically in America, or you are the most pro-Israel. Like you're
Just
like
rabid.
You're like an evangelical pastor level pro-Israel, where you're just, you know, you're one step removed.
Anti-Semitically pro-Israel.
Yeah, you're one step removed from just being like John Hagee style, talking about fucking, you know, it was good that the Holocaust happened. Like John Hagee said
Says that and was invited to the pro-Israel rally.
Yeah.
To speak there.
But they're like, you know, John Fetterman style, I guess.
Yes.
Who's another insanely weird avenue there. Okay, but let's talk about it. So AOC becomes more notable, and people start liking her. She's very telegenic. So what happens?
So she's like 3 weeks in, and she's just taking every request that comes in. She's getting bigger and bigger requests. She's eventually on the like late night shows, that's like A+ list celebrity status from 3 weeks earlier, being completely obscure. Then she agrees to do this PBS firing line with Margaret Carlson, who's kind of conservative reporter. And during the 2018 campaign, and I bet you remember this. So this is when the March of Return is going on.
Yeah.
Which now all of a sudden people are talking about, because like, why won't Gazans do anything nonviolent? Well, it's like, you remember the Great March of Return.
Yeah.
Like, every Friday, civil society, it was a bottom-up organized thing. They would picnic. They'd meet down by the fence, and then they would march to the fence, parade around, and they called it the March of Return. They'd look at like the land that used to be theirs, and it was just to symbolize the oppression and the dislocation.
And this was happening side by side as like the embassy was being moved into Jerusalem, the American embassy. And one of those points, like literally there was like in Abby Martin's documentary, she shows this side by side is like really damning. On the one hand, you have like, you know, Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump and everybody celebrating like the move of the American embassy into Jerusalem, solidifying that like Jerusalem belongs to Israel. Major point of contention for those of you who don't know, for obvious reasons, for historic reasons, but also for religious reasons as well. It's supposed to be the heart of like all three of the Abrahamic religions, right? And on the other screen, you're watching Israeli occupying force snipers take out 42 kneecaps per day by their own estimations, something that the Israeli occupying forces Twitter account is even owned up to, saying, we know exactly where every single bullet landed. We have an account for every single bullet. And they shot around 10,000, wounded and maimed around 10,000 people. Then they shot and killed around 200 plus in that entire process.
And so there was one day where they killed like 60 people. And so AOC posted on Twitter, this is before she wins the primary, she posted like, this is a massacre. Like 60 people protesting nonviolently massacred. Like silence is complicity. Like we need to stand up against this. Yeah. And my New York politicians have been silent about this for too long. And so, you know, that got her noticed a little bit, because it was like, you know, who's this New York politician who's, you know, willing to step out on this? But then it didn't really get talked about much until she gets this firing line interview. Maybe we could even find that. So this Margaret Carlson, she's like, so you said in, you know, May 2018, you know, X, like what did you mean by this? And she said, it's this very vague. I think I have the quotes in here. It's very vague. Like, what's your
this
position?
is it. Twin Cities PBS.
Yeah, there it is.
Found it.
A few weeks ago, welcome to Firing Line.
I bet it's toward the end.
Having me. When was
I remember watching this. In 2018, Firing Line with Margaret Hoover. This is turning into, I guess, a relatively contentious interview all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Because the issue of Israel comes up.
Yeah.
AOC at the time, I would say, is like very telegenic. surprising. Everyone is like, oh my God, where does she come from? We love her. And then this like weird thing happened where like everyone who hates Bernie Sanders loved AOC,
Yes.
which was my favorite thing because I'm like, but they're the same.
They agree on everything.
They are like they're cut from the same cloth, and maybe
she
in
like
certain
volunteered for
instances-
him.
Maybe in certain instances, AOC more progressive than Bernie Sanders, as a matter of fact, especially in recent times. I think that the exact opposite of that happens against AOC as well from the left, where like people hate AOC but then love Bernie Sanders.
Fine with Bernie,
yeah, and it's just like, I don't think you guys are looking at the issues at all and are just like perma stuck on the aesthetics of the matter. Now, you might be like an anti-electoralist, Marxist-Leninist, you know.
But then you got to hate them both.
Yeah, Maoist third worldist or whatever. But and so then they're both American KKK, bourgeois Democrats. So that's different. But you can't pick and choose one or the other. Like they are pretty much aligned. So let's watch.
Then you will find here. And so this idea that something is low skill and that it's going to be a weight, I think is probably a false lens.
Do you think that when people say low skill, though, they think it's a weight on the economy? Because I think of it as sort of the robust driver of the economy.
Yeah, I would hope more
Here you
people
go.
would take your
Stay
perspective.
hydrated.
But I think
Okay, so she's still talking
someone that's
about
low skill is going to
Take many foreign policy positions because you were seating a Democratic incumbent.
Oh, here we go.
But now you
Foreign
are
policy.
very likely going to be going to Washington, and you'll have to sort of build out some of those foreign policy positions. You, in the campaign, made one tweet or made one statement that referred to a killing by Israeli soldiers of civilians in Gaza. And called it a massacre, which became a little bit controversial. But I haven't seen anywhere.
It's like 60 people killed.
Yeah, that's crazy that's controversial.
That's controversial.
Wow, it's really wild how controversial it was when you said 60 people massacred is calling that a massacre is kind of controversial. Just a little bit of genocide, you know?
I'll see if I can find her exact tweet while she's talking.
well, I believe absolutely in Israel's right to exist. I am a proponent of a two-state solution. And for me, this is not a
Wait, I'm sorry,
referendum.
you say she's a
Absolutely in Israel's
Two-state,
right to exist. I am a proponent of a two-state solution. And for me,
So her position here is really interesting because that's just like, that is literally, depending on like where she's coming from, you could basically state that is like soft liberal J Street style Zionism, right? And even then it's like, whoa,
it's
chill
not-
now.
This is not
Things
a
have changed
referendum, I think,
dramatically
on
is what
the
I mean.
State of Israel. For me,
Oh, here's
the
her
lens
tweet if
through
you want
which
to hear
I
it.
saw this
Okay,
incident.
so what was her tweet?
So this is the tweet that is quote unquote controversial according to Margaret Carlson. This
Someone said, don't let this boomer try to find it out.
thank you.
They
Thank
called you a boomer. This is a massacre. I hope my peers have the moral courage to call it as such. No state or entity is absolved of mass shootings of protesters. There is no justification. Palestinian people deserve basic human dignity as anyone else. Democrats can't be silent about this anymore. Now, this is in May 14th, 2018. That is, I would say, a long time before it became even remotely fashionable to say anything even tangentially critical of Israel, like
Right.
on accident, okay?
Right. And 37 people killed.
Yeah.
So she's calling 37 people killed a massacre. And,
Yeah.
and we're being told that that's controversial.
Yeah, that's what she's being criticized for.
As an activist, as an organizer, if 60 people were killed in Ferguson, Missouri, if 60 people were killed in the South Bronx, unarmed, 60 people were killed in Puerto Rico, I just looked at that incident more through just as an incident. And to me, it would just be completely unacceptable if that happened on our shores. But I am,
Of course, the dynamic there in terms of geopolitics and the war in the Middle East is very different than people expressing their First
because she's
Amendment right to
equating
protest.
Palestinian lives with other lives.
with lives in America.
Right. And
Black people in
that
America.
she doesn't realize, like, because she's a normal human being at this point, she doesn't realize that that's crossing a line.
Yeah.
Like, you can't. Summer Lee got hit for the same thing. This guy in Pittsburgh, big donor against her, said, I heard her compare the discrimination against Palestinians to the discrimination against African Americans here in the United States, and that's very dangerous. Like,
Yeah,
you're not allowed
Yeah,
to
you know
make
what?
that universalist
You know why it's
claim.
dangerous? Because, and I will say this with my entire chest, historically, yes, but currently, if you look at the discrimination that black people face in America, which is gross, and I talk about it every fucking day, if Palestinians, the 5 million that currently exist under Israeli occupation both in Gaza and in the West Bank, got discriminated against in similar levels to Black Americans right now, that would be a immeasurable improvement on their lives. Like, the entire world would get together and say, look how wonderful the peace process
There'd
is.
be peace prizes given out all over the place. Yeah.
Literally everyone would get a Nobel Peace Prize, okay? Everyone involved would be given Nobel Peace Prizes in that situation. That is how tragic the lives and livelihoods of Palestinians are in Gaza and in the West Bank. It's like a sliding scale of, like, if you're in Gaza, it's the absolute worst. If you're in West Bank, it's like genuinely devastating and it's directly an apartheid, obviously. And then if you are a Palestinian citizen of Israel, then we arrive at like the Jim Crow style discrimination that is legal in the state of Israel because there's an apartheid state based on Jewish supremacy. It's not like
it's written into law.
Yeah, it's not like a crazy thing that I'm saying, but because, of course, if you're uninitiated with the issue and you look at it from the outside, but you are also perfectly aware of anti-Semitism, which is a gross bigotry, of course, you think, oh, there's no way.
Can't possibly be true.
This can't be true. This guy's probably being anti-Semitic. Like, there's no shot, right? But I do think that since 2021, especially with B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and all of these other like liberal NGOs and human rights groups openly stating that Israel is an apartheid state, things have shifted quite a bit. I would say since 2021, especially so. It's like very... people can just have a moment of honesty and openly state it, and then if pushed back on, you could just go back to the liberal NGOs and be like, well, they're saying it too because it's the correct thing.
And this is before that kind of shift.
Yeah.
And also she's not steeped in it, as you'll see.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that to me is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term
she thinks this is like a fairly basic and fair thing to say.
What did you mean by that?
So run that back. Sorry.
She goes, the occupation of Palestine. No, it's fine. She said the occupation of Palestine, and she's like using normal human language because she's a normie. She's like a relatively well-read bartender who's like assessing the situation as a normie.
She used to watch TYT a lot.
Yeah. And of course, I don't know if she watches anymore, but I feel like Jank is very critical of AOC from time to time, so I don't know. But regardless, well, now she watches the HasanAbi broadcast.
Obviously. Yeah.
So she is just like approaching it as like a normal person would, to be like, well, it's like kind of fucked up. And of course, you can't do that. There is no, you can't. You have to be incredibly careful in the way that you talk about it, especially in 2018. This is what I've talked about in the beginning, like when I started this iteration of the siege, right? As I've covered it time and time again over the course of the past 10 years, I've very publicly, very vocally been supportive of Palestine and Palestinian emancipation. And one of the things I told people was like, there's absolutely a double standard, and you cannot ever be callous, and you cannot ever use words that will be misconstrued and weaponized against you, because there's a long track record of doing so. You know what I mean? Don't call AOC a bartender. She's a congresswoman. No, at this point, she literally was a bartender for much longer than she had been a
she's
congresswoman.
Not sworn in as a congresswoman yet.
Yeah.
She's not even a congresswoman elect. She had won the primary.
Yeah, this is in 2018.
Yeah, she worked in the bar in 2018.
Yeah.
I think what I meant is like the
run back her question, because her question is really wild.
Increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that to me is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing.
Jordan Ewell in the chat said, based Ryan, 36-month subscriber, also known as really chill guy.
Excellent.
In some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Oh,
Do you think you can expand on
She's
that?
like, God.
Oh, God
she's
damn
like,
it.
And she's like, come on. Because all she said is the occupation of Palestine. And I think in her mind, she's like, I know that there are third rails everywhere on this issue.
Yeah.
Where there's landmines, but I don't know exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Did I step on one?
Yeah.
Because she genuinely doesn't know.
Yeah.
And you could see, okay, occupation of Palestine, like you could see somebody saying, well, that means you believe that Israel
Palestine
doesn't have a right to exist. But she already started the interview saying
Israel has a right to
Israel
exist.
has a right to exist. I'm for two-state solution.
Or she could mean, like, when she says occupation of Palestine, like, what do you mean? You think Palestine is an independent state, an entity, which is not, you know, how could you be a state without a standing military or like your own personal, you know, form of governance? Like, are you talking about Gaza as a separate entity? Like, there's so many questions, and someone with like very limited knowledge can very easily just like cut through whatever pro-Palestinian talking points you might have, because, you know, that is the normative position for in the eyes of Americans, is that like it's not even a question, right? Like, what the fuck do you mean Palestinian people?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also just, I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
Like,
you know,
tap.
for me, I'm a firm believer in finding a two-state solution in this issue. And I'm happy to sit down with leaders on both of these. For me, I just look at things through a human rights lens, and I may not use the right words. I know this is a very honest.
That's very honest, and you're going
issue.
to. I mean, it's very honest, and when you you know, get to Washington and you're an elected member of Congress, you'll have the opportunity to talk to people on all sides and visit Israel.
God, I want to throw up. Oh my God.
This is your introduction to this issue as an incoming member of Congress.
It's just, it's so, it's very annoying. Okay.
And visit the West Bank. And
Absolutely. And I think that's one of those things that's important too, is that, you know, especially with the district that I represent, I come from the South Bronx. I come from a Puerto Rican background, and Middle Eastern politics is not exactly what's at my kitchen table every night.
Yeah, and that's an important point too.
Sure.
People don't understand that.
I despise I despise the fucking incredibly high bar you must always clear if you talk about human rights abuses that our most important ally, our forward operating base in the fucking Middle East, is engaging in on a fucking daily basis in the maintenance of an apartheid regime. Anyway,
so I don't even think she did that badly with her answers. It's just the body language.
Yeah,
and
you can tell she's uncomfortable. Yeah. So what happens after this?
So after this, so she and Bernie decide that they're going to Kansas to get behind this guy, Brent Welder.
I remember him.
This is a fascinating race too. He's running against Sharice Davids for an open Democratic congressional nomination to flip a red district. And so AOC and Bernie are like, look, we need to prove that this Bernie style, AOC style populism can win not just in Vermont and not just in the Bronx and Queens, but Kansas. Because I mean, Kansas is just the, you know, it's pure symbolism in every way. So like, if we can get Brent Welder, who was a Bernie delegate, a labor attorney, elected, and then have him beat the Republican, you know, that's a huge message to the Democratic Party that this is not just cool for like blue seats, but we can actually like, have a governing majority.
Real left populism works in red states and red districts. That's what the point is.
And so she and Bernie fly out to Kansas. We can talk about how that race unfolded, because that was fascinating too. But Corbin Trent, while they're out in Kansas, this is about a week later, he gets a call. And guy's like, hey, I'm calling. I'm with AIPAC, and we saw your interview on Firing Line. And in the interview, she says, I want to talk to people on all sides. And he's like, I can put this together. We already have $100,000, you know, ready to go to start the conversation. We'll educate you, make sure that you know the right things to say. And they also sponsor a trip to Israel. So you can come back from that trip and say you've done this and that. And there's a lot more money where that came from. And so Corbin took it to both AOC and Shroycott, not because he thought that they might take it, but wanted to tell them about it. And they at that point, she's like internationally famous in just 3 weeks. So money is pouring in. It wasn't even a question that they weren't going to take $100,000 from AIPAC. And it's not like AIPAC writes a check like from AIPAC to AOC. It's like a bunch of different AIPAC donors bundled together, and then they meet. And so they turned the money down, but it was like this introduction of like, oh wow, this is how this issue goes. Because Corbin also thought like, what if she was any one of the other 434 members of Congress, who's not like a celebrity?
And you would, by the way, his expectation is perfectly valid as a New York congressperson because time and time again, I don't know if he directly did this, but I know AIPAC has with Richie Torres, and we see the other side of that. We see what happens when you do get that money and you do actually internalize the Hasbara operations and become a very vocal mouthpiece. Fetterman didn't take an AIPAC deal. He took a Democratic majority for Israel deal, if I am not mistaken.
AIPAC was like,
but yeah,
AIPAC was kind of hovering on the sidelines as well. But yeah,
but
he worked with DMFI.
Yeah, but we can talk about that as well in a second. But I guess the point is, she didn't take that money because she was a Justice Democrat style DSA backed candidate who was not taking PAC money in general at that point, and I don't think even to this day. So.
Yeah. And didn't need it, which is the key thing.
And didn't need it as well. And she did not take that, and she did not take the trip. J Street does the alternative to this, I guess.
Right.
And I know Bowman did the J Street thing, where they are the soft Zionist liberal side, where J Street has actual, even at certain points, anti-Zionist in its leadership as well. But the president, of course, is like a liberal Zionist, and they do trips to the West Bank. It's like AIPAC does like a birthright style trip, and then J Street does the trip to the West Bank, where they show you how bad the occupation is and how the apartheid looks like, what the apartheid looks like,
and that changed Bowman's understanding of it.
Yeah,
because like when you see that for yourself, because like you were saying earlier, it's so hard to believe that what people say about it is true. You're like that can't. No, there's exits that only people with Jewish license plates can go off of? No, that can't be possible.
That sounds a lot like another thing that we all know what it is historically. It's the apartheid, as it is.
As Ta-Nehisi Coates said, like when he went to this area of the West Bank, he's like, this all seemed very familiar to me. Like I understood it, but he understood it more historically because our like white supremacy now is integrated through just various like inchoate systems, not written right into law in that way. That's Jim Crow stuff that TNC is familiar with from like reading about it, talking to parents and grandparents, but not anymore. Like there are no separate but equal schools, or we've resegregated our schools through other means.
Yes,
but
we have obviously America is like kind of goated on white supremacy. It was built around white supremacy, so we're very good at massaging white supremacy into all of our institutions in a way that is like very insidious, where even if you are a black person, sometimes you don't recognize it. Like it's constantly reinforced through our education system. So it is way more difficult to identify unless you have personal experience, which of course many black and brown people do have personal experience. Oftentimes traumatic experiences with like some of the organs of white supremacy, whether it be the police or the criminal justice system, or even like your teacher or someone in a position of power early on in your life. Israel's supremacist values are very much codified in a way that you normally don't see in the 21st century in a Western aligned nation, especially. You don't see that ever.
Yeah, unless you have to go to something crazy like Saudi Arabia, but nobody defends. Saudi. Nobody's like Saudi Arabia has a right to exist with its like beheading people and
exactly.
Like
they don't do that.
We're like, they're our ally and they're useful and we like the low gas prices.
Trump kind of did that. Yeah, where he was like, what are you going to do? Buy $10 billion worth of weapons? If we don't sell it, Russia will.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
There are people who at least take that stance, the honest stance, I would say. But yeah, it's I think like a lot of people in my audience are very much initiated with this, obviously, and they're very familiar with this process. But it's interesting to see AOC deviate away. But it's also very important that people understand that this is how the money faucet begins and how it takes hold, and then. In an alternative timeline, maybe AOC is like Richie Torres now.
Right. So their next play then, so Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib get elected this same cycle. And then January of 2019 is when Democratic Majority for Israel puts its PAC together, like in direct response to these members of Congress coming into office. Like that's their and they're very clear. Like, they don't explicitly necessarily name them, but they're like, there are rising voices inside the party that are not, sufficiently supportive of Israel, and we need to organize within the Democratic Party to push back against that.
So I remember something about Democratic Majority for Israel that I want to talk about. If I'm not mistaken, didn't they also have some of the same guys that operated in the UK against the Corbyn campaign as well?
That sounds familiar.
I feel like they had ties to some of the people that were also operating the similar like anti-Corbyn smear campaign in the UK as well. And Democratic Majority for Israel is set up on January 29, 2019, 4 years ago. Their first target actually isn't Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. It's Bernie Sanders.
In the presidential.
Yeah. Which is really funny because Americans are not as like developed to understand that you could be Jewish and anti-Semitic. Which I don't think Bernie Sanders is, by the way. Do not misunderstand me. But that is a thing. You can be an anti-Semitic
like
Jewish
Kissinger.
person. Exactly. Great example, actually. But to the broader American public, a figurehead that is beloved, the most popular congressperson at the time, who is Jewish, being smeared as an anti-Semite, they're going to be like, the fuck are you talking about? So I think that was when they kind of like...
And they ran their ads against him. They didn't talk about, and this was their pattern all the way up until very recently. They would never talk about Israel-Palestine in their ads because it does not work in a Democratic primary.
Yeah.
To like call out Bernie Sanders for being somewhat critical of the occupation, and so what they hit Bernie for was his heart attack. They're like, he can't stand up to Trump because he had a heart attack.
Yeah.
So and the same, like they hit like Donna Edwards, this who used to be a member of Congress, and they spent $7 million against her. They said she was like bad at constituent service. So like they just find something and just like hammer it. But they don't say, she's too supportive of Palestine or she's like too critical of Israel, because that doesn't work.
Now, there's another piece. I kind of want to watch this with Ryan when he comes back before he leaves, because this one is really good and it's right in the pocket of his book as well. Ali Velshi has been doing a phenomenal job really testing the boundaries of what you're allowed to say on MSNBC, if you ask me. He had Summer Lee on to talk about AIPAC and its influence on American politics.
Yeah, she talked to me for the book a bunch. And really interesting stuff from her. Anyway, go ahead. Curious.
Joined now by a lawmaker who was able to win against an AIPAC-endorsed primary challenger, the Democratic Congresswoman Summer Lee of Pennsylvania. She represents the state's 12th district, which covers Pittsburgh and much of Allegheny County. Congresswoman, nice to see you in person. You and I have talked many times remotely. I'm going to just ask you bluntly, why did AIPAC invest so much money and energy in seeing you not elected?
I think we'll have a difficult time hearing what the truth is. I speculate that the reason is because I'm a Black progressive woman. Right, there was a trend before I started to run for Congress that we had seen in cycles before that of them targeting a very specific type of congressperson. Right. And to be clear, it's not just Congress people who are going to criticize Israel. These criticisms also come with a critique of how our government works. It comes of a critique of corporations, of our environmental justice policies. We talk about criminal legal reform and so many other issues that I think, and what we can see is when we directly look at who's behind AIPAC, those are the type of issues that those folks also are attempting to protect or to keep folks like us out.
So, and in fact, we could talk about Cori Bush. We can talk about Ilhan Omar. We can talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And very interesting how these are the main designated targets of AIPAC.
And one of the ones that breaks the mold was Andy Levin, if you remember this. He was a kind of synagogue president. And the most kind of pro-labor. He also was the most pro-labor guy, not coincidentally, I think, in the Democratic Party. And AIPAC, when they went after him, and I have this in the book too, they specifically said the reason they went after him is because he would defend people like Rashida Tlaib or defend Ilhan Omar, and then it made it harder for them to go after Rashida if you've got a synagogue president saying that, actually, no, I agree with her on this.
That's why you see the ADL going ham on Jewish Voice for Peace. And and all these other Jewish organizations, the Jewish anti-Zionist organizations right now, going way harder on them than fucking actual out and about white supremacists.
You have to clear out their defense.
And you can't do fucking shit about it. Jonathan Greenblatt, suck my dick, okay? 51% of Jews under the age of 35 are actually fucking critical of Israel, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can fucking cry and complain all you want.
These American Jews are shutting down the biggest pro-Israel event in the United States, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee Conference. Their group is called If Not Now.
If Not Now came out of the summer of 2014 as a response to the Gaza war. And I think a larger transformation of my generation of Judaism and a shift of consciousness to what it means to be Jewish and what it means to support Israel. AIPAC, I won't let you speak for me.
Fucking bullshit. Literally sucking off Elon Musk after he literally said it's like some of the most anti-Semitic shit you could say, which is like Jews are making America less white.
Yeah, and then he gets on the phone with him.
Yeah.
Musk tweets that he's going to ban from the river to the sea on Twitter. And Greenblatt's like, all right, cool. We're
good now. We're good. He's like, I think he's literally losing his own, like, any semblance of, like, authority or any, like, goodwill that he might have had from, like, otherwise progressive Jews who are Zionists themselves are probably going to be like, what the fuck? What are you doing?
Because you actually do need an organization to combat anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And so to destroy that organization's credibility is, in the end, doing the opposite of what the organization set out to do.
I mean, I think the ADL has.
I don't actually know the history of the ADL that well.
Oh, really?
I know that I've been in their crosshairs occasionally.
Let's just say that they used to partner with the other Israel ally, South Africa, back in the day, and were caught spying on again. Labor unions, the NAACP, Jewish activists, when they were collaborating and actually using the same spy network that the South African government was using as well. Anti-apartheid activists. Well,
then there should be a real organization. Dedicated to that.
So they're definitely. I mean, the ADL has always been like a pro-Israel organization first and foremost, rather than one that works against like anti-Semitism.
But yes. So Summerlee's point is that the same interests, the same people, funding AIPAC and funding DMFI, also happen to be super rich. Because if you can cut $1 million check to AIPAC, you've got a lot of money. If you have a lot of money, you care about tax structure. You care about laws around private equity. You care about different, like half them seem to be like sports owners when you go through FEC, like they own, owner of the Bears or whatever. That's all public trough stuff. So you care about public policy in a way that is completely distinct from Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, we missed it while you were saying that. He said, terrorist sympathizer go to Gaza and bareback goats with the rest since you love them so much. I personally, when I hear stuff like that, I think it's very disrespectful to their own mothers because I fucked them. I fucked your mom. And the fact that you are calling your own mom a goat really messed up. Sorry. Ryan.
This is like a fan or something? Like, where do these people come from?
Oh, this is literally on a daily basis. This is one that, like, I caught before the filter grabbed it. I get this all the time. Okay. This is like my daily activities is that I'm a goat fucker. And
people are going to... It's just an odd use of time. But whatever. You guys do whatever you want with your day.
Yeah. A lot of them saying I'm pro-Hamas. Chatter, your mom is the goat. The throat goat. Okay, we're moving on. All right, let's get back to Ali Velshi.
Many people who fit into that category are being targeted because the things that you've said that are critical of the government of Israel or supportive of Palestinian self-determination, you're not at the tip of the spear on this stuff, I have to say.
No. I mean, I think that objectively, the things that we are saying are measured. We are careful in how we talk about this, but we do recognize that this is a foreign nation state, that just as we would critique the United States, as we critique our own government, that we have to offer critiques of governments that we also give money to. Here in the United States, we give $3.8 billion a year to the Israeli government. And I think that that should obviously come with some critique. It comes with no conditions at all right now. That's the extent to the criticism that we offer. That's the extent of our conversation about Israel that elicits this type of response.
So does that
And she told me relative to this, she's like, I was in the Pennsylvania State House. Like, and similar to how at the very beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how AOC said, like, around my Bronx table, like it wasn't a thing that we really talked about. She said the same thing, like in Pittsburgh and in the Pennsylvania State House, Israel-Palestine is just not a major question. The thing she got hit for was 2 tweets, like it's a thread of 2 tweets that said, when I see discrimination against Palestinians, it reminds me of some discrimination here in the U.S. That was it. And then they came for her. And the way she put it to me is like, if that's all they're going to use to come for me, like they were coming for me anyway. And it wasn't really about that.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's, I think the ADL or even AIPAC and many other like outwardly ultra-nationalist, ultra-Zionist institutions and their extensions, like the Canary Mission, like that other fucking freak who has the doxing trucks. I don't think they operate on any like virtuous mission. I think their goal is to suppress any invocation that like Palestinians are humans, because it's not even about like truth or honesty or real they don't have like a real job of trying to find and like dox anti-Semites. Sometimes they might, as a matter of fact, even on accident, or like the ADL's database like has genuine white supremacists as well, because they have to maintain a sense of credibility, right? So when they have more momentum when they say the Jewish Voice for Peace is anti-Semitic, just like this fucking Nazi, right? But it's always about trying to stop any kind of mention, to make it as politically toxic as possible, to simply mention that Palestinians are human beings. And they've really, I think, gone too far. I think that this is just like going to alienate a lot of young people.
Yeah, they're going to come for her again. We'll see this time whether or not the voters there are like, no, this is ridiculous, or if $10 million is enough to do it.
Surprise you that you get that kind of response? I mean, you were really amongst the biggest targets of AIPAC of all, and you didn't succumb to it.
I think it was shocking. I think it's shocking what they're doing to democracy, right? I can think about how it impacted me, how it impacted my district. It's Pittsburgh, it's a small media market. $3 million can go quite far. But I think what we have tried to lift up is that they never talked about Israel anyways. They spent the $3 million to spread disinformation, to connect me with Donald Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are, in fact, are the types of candidates that AIPAC has supported.
Right.
They spent the money to say I wasn't enough of a Democrat. And it harmed voters who were looking to make an informed decision. It stripped them of their ability to make a decision about democracy. So when I say that AIPAC and others like it are an existential threat to our democracy, that sort of money should not come into our elections.
Can we also finish us off with two points that I want to make? One, why the fuck is AIPAC not a foreign lobbyist organization?
The actual answer is that it's funded by Americans, that there's enough. I mean, they certainly haven't been caught with any like foreign money. There are so many rich folks in this country that you can prop up a major organization of that size, which is why somebody like Qatar or UAE or even Saudi, like there aren't that many Saudi Americans or
there's a lot of Russian Americans. There's a lot of Russian Americans. There's a lot of Americans of dual citizenship. There's a lot of
Pakistani Americans, and they've like and they've got some wealth there too. And I was talking to a group of them recently who was complaining, well, like, why don't we have any influence? I'm like, you guys need an AIPAC. Like, you need to organize.
The problem is there's well, for Pakistan, it's a little bit different because it's like also in some ways a client state as well, even though you guys have done great reporting on that, showing the deviations and how severe the consequences. How severe those consequences have been for like minor deviations. Yeah. But the reality is that, like, of course you can't do a fucking AIPAC for Palestine.
But to your point, Mark Mellman, who was the founder of DMFI, is a consultant for, or was, if maybe he ended the contract a week ago, but he has been for a long time, for Yair Lapid, who was Israeli foreign minister and then Israeli prime minister. So he's like that, and that's literally a consultant for that guy. And he told me for the book, the reason he goes after the American left is that Netanyahu uses criticism of Israel from the left to say Israel needs to go further to the right. So actually, he's going after AOC and the rest of them so that he can take Bibi out and replace him with Yair Lapid, which
I don't believe that.
Hilarious bank shot, whatever. But also, he's actively acknowledging that part of his work here in the United States is for the benefit of an Israeli politician.
Yes.
But if you suggest that he should register as a foreign agent, somebody's like, how are you suggesting
dual loyalty?
Are you suggesting that Israel is a foreign country?
Yeah, dual loyalty, fucking racist, anti-Semitic. How dare you?
Like she used the word foreign country. It's almost across the line to say that Israel's a foreign country.
No, I say it regularly. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, there's no other equivalent. There's no other equivalence where like a foreign nation can be this hands-on in the affairs of the domestic affairs. Like, bro, you remember the Chicago lieutenant governor, I think it was? Like, that was a DSA-backed guy.
Oh, I think it's a driver. Hold on a second.
Oh, okay. If you got to go, then... yeah, you got to get out of here. Sorry. I just... Okay.
Be right there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you,
for
guys.
coming on.
Thank you, chat.
And this was wonderful. Anytime you're interested. What do you want to shout out real quick before you leave?
Yes. So the book, it's in the chat. Go buy that thing. I read the audio book. Get the hardcover so you can put it on your table. It's called. Here it is.
It's called The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution.
And it is a good book. You're going to enjoy reading it.
It's a good book.
It's not going to make you happy, but you're going to be glad that you read it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, brother. Do I need to
You don't need to do anything.
I'm good.
No, you're good. No, you should be fine. All right. Thank you. All right. Did you say Chicago, or should I say Chicago Lieutenant Governor? Yeah, Illinois Lieutenant Governor. Shut up. It was Illinois Lieutenant Governor, right? That was like a DSA-backed candidate. And then he had to like literally drop out of the race and apologize because like at the time the Chicago DSA chapter had like that he was a part of was like pro-Palestine or something. How fucking crazy, dude. What was it? Am I making this up? I mean, I know I'm not making it up, but I don't know if it was like the Chicago. Carlos Rosa was his name. That's him, right? Trying to have Jonathan M. Katz on sometimes. Yeah, I like his stuff too. Here it is from The Intercept. Ironically, there it is from Zaid Jilani, who was like only woke on this issue and almost nothing else. Socialists forced off Democratic campaign for criticism of Israel. A candidate for Illinois Lieutenant Governor is coming under fire for his affiliation with the Democratic Socialists of America and its support of BDS. How fucking nutty. Illinois State Governor and candidate for Governor Daniel Bliss and his running mate Carlos Ramirez Rosa. Think about that. Democratic State Senator Daniel Bliss's gubernatorial ticket. He's an alderman now in a member of the Chicago City Council. So that's great for him. But overall, I just want you to understand like the absolute psychopathic ways in which like people get owned for the lightest forms of criticism against Israel. Think about that. For a fucking foreign country, suck my dick. Get out of here. No shot. I hope I wasn't being too aggressive with Ryan here. I think I was though. I mean, I said some shit that I would look at him on camera and I was like, oh God, I hope he's not thinking about what happens to him sitting next to me. I did say throat goat. Anyway. Also, before you say, also let him speak more next time, much love and glad you got him. Chatter, let me tell you something. If I were to do an interview, which is like usually historically the least successful aspect of the HasanAbi broadcast, for 4 hours, you would have left a long time ago. If it was simply an hour long, then it would have been an interview. But because he was willing to sit here for 4 hours, it was like more so going to be a regular HasanAbi broadcast featuring Ryan Grimm.